So as of tonight, more than 15,000 Palestinians have been killed and over 42,000 injured by Israeli attacks in Gaza since October 7th. A week ago, more than 1,000 community members convened in Oakland to commit to fighting for a ceasefire with all the urgency that it requires. A day later, organizers in Oakland helped secure a ceasefire resolution in the city council unanimously. What followed were slanderous accusations against those organizers, especially our Palestinian comrades, that characterized them as, quote, pro-terrorist and equated righteous challenges to Zionism and anti-Semitism. These defamatory attacks demonstrate that as we pursue a ceasefire now to end the Gaza genocide, we must also work to defend our movements as they counter attacks by forces that seek to justify atrocities, endanger our leaders in this movement, and discourage the ever-growing number of people of conscience from joining our calls to end the bloodshed and support the survival and freedom of the Palestinian people. So that's why we're here tonight, to ground ourselves in the historical traditions of solidarity among Black, Jewish, and Palestinian communities, to assess the political forces against our efforts to end the violence and their tactics, and to identify as best as we can our path forward. Tonight, we are honored to be joined by a panel of organizers who have deep knowledge of the Bay, of Oakland, and the fight against Zionism and in solidarity with the free Palestine. Kali Akuno. Kali Akuno is a co-founder and co-director of Cooperation Jackson. Yeah, give it up for Cooperation Jackson. He was the director of special projects and external funding for the late Mayor Chokwe Lumumba of Jackson, Mississippi, where he focused on supporting cooperative development and the introduction of eco-friendly and carbon reduction methods of operation and the promotion of human rights and international relations for the city. He served as the co-director of the U.S. Human Rights Network, the executive director of the People's Hurricane Relief Fund based in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and he was co-founder of the School for Social Justice and Community Development, SSJCD, a public school serving the academic needs of low-income African American and Latina communities right here in Oakland. And he's just released Jackson Rising Redux, a new edition of Jackson Rising, a collection of essays on Black resistance at a time of global health, economic, climate crisis. That's available now on PM Press. Please give it up for Kali Akuno. Kat Brooks. Kat Brooks is host of Law and Disorder on KPFA and a longtime performer, organizer, and activist. She played a central role in the struggle for justice for Oscar Grant and has spent the last decade working with impacted communities and families to rapidly respond to police violence and radically transform the way our communities are policed and incarcerated. She is the co-founder of the Anti-Police Terror Project and the executive director of the Justice Teams Network. Please give it up for Kat Brooks. Nadya Tannous is a passionate community organizer, writer, and researcher born and raised in the Bay Area on unceded Ohlone territory. With a focus on refugee rights, intercommunity empowerment, and returning land to the people and people returning to the land, she is a member of the Arab Amplified team through Temescal Art Center, entering their second season of Arab Amp Folktales, and she's a founding member of the Ghassan Kanafani Resistance Arts Scholarship, a project of the Palestinian Youth Movement. Nadya currently serves as the Director of Operations at Honor the Earth, and she is currently co-incubating a new project through ReRise called Rising for Our Motherlands. Please give it up for Nadya. Sara Kershnar. Sara Kershnar is a co-founder of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network. Yes, please give it up for her. She's a queer mom, an anti-racist, anti-Zionist, queer liberation, transformative justice, harm reduction, prisoner solidarity, anti-repression thinker, writer, and organizer. Please welcome Sara Kershnar. And to help moderate our conversation tonight is my dear comrade and a CPE advisory member, Maisha Quint. Maisha has been working for liberatory change for the past 25 years. She's a cultural worker and a prison industrial complex abolitionist, and she's worked with a variety of anti-carceral campaigns and organizations and was a core member of the East Side Arts Alliance for nearly 10 years. Currently, she's an advisory board member for CPE and a board member of Casa Justa, Just Cause. Give it up for Maisha Quint. And with that, I'll hand it to you.
All right, y'all. How y'all feeling? Yeah? Yeah? You know, I haven't been with a microphone in a long time, so I have to make sure y'all are with us. I'm going to position so I can see all of you. I just want to thank you all for coming. It's Monday night. I know many of us have been to multiple actions, meetings, protests, City Hall, and we're tired, but we're energized and enraged also. So I just want to thank you for coming out. I want to thank folks who are online in little boxes, who are attending this virtually. And I really want to thank this panel. I feel honored to be in this space with you all. Many of you I've known for decades, and so it's really great to be here with y'all. Before we started, I've been thinking about how to ground this event. And I'm thinking a lot about lineages, right? I'm thinking about lineages as Thomas opened, and we know that entire families are being obliterated as we speak. Those lineages are literally disappearing. I'm thinking about the lineages that we have as organizers, the lineages of solidarity. And so for me, I think about, as a Black feminist, what is my lineage in this time? Who do I come from? Who are my people? And who ground me and who helped me propel forward, right? So I think of June Jordan, who was one of my first mentors, particularly around Palestinian solidarity. I think about Angela Davis. I think about my mother. I think about folks from MXGM, like Aquia Jackson. I think of Rachel Jackson. I think of Kat. I think of Aquia. I think of Layla. I think of Rama. I think of the Morar sisters. I think of so many people who helped guide and sharpen my own analysis around Palestine. And I really want to name Liz Darius as well, because she is my sister. And I have no doubt that if Liz were here, she'd be moderating this panel, right? And Liz has actually been one of the main mentors for me in this work to sharpen my understanding of settler colonialism as it applies in international contexts. So I just want to name my lineage, and I invite all of you to think of your lineages, right? Who brings you here? Who keeps you in this work? And why does it matter to mention them as we try to be better allies, better supporters, in more solidarity with our Palestinian siblings? So let's think about lineages as we are in this conversation. Okay, so to start, I really want to ground us historically, right? We're talking about this is a big topic of conversation, like Black and Jewish solidarity with Palestinian rights and Palestinian freedom. So I wanted to ask all of you, kind of, what's the history of joint struggle among Black, Palestinian, and Jewish communities that's really grounded and oriented against Zionism? And I'm going to start with you, Kali, and we'll just go on down. I'm going to, yeah. We're going to freestyle it. Yep. This, okay. Nope, your mic doesn't work. You have to project.
Project? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Either way.
Your mic echoes, actually. That's impressive.
You just have to work with it. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank y'all for coming out. And that place would not have existed without Dominique. And so to continue to be in practice and conversation and background mentor, and we've been going back and forth half the day about keeping her cool. Only use your outside voice if you need it in the struggle tonight. So I'm waiting to see what the outcome of that is. And I'm lifting that up as a concrete and a living example of how we carry not forward legacy, but how we continue an engagement of solidarity in the here and now, and the practical and the concrete. Because she's told me a number of different things about some of the ways in which she's been kind of threatened or pressured to kind of absolve her position. And we were lucky enough to be in Virginia with each other about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And she said, I was wearing a kufiya, and she said, I need that. I'm taking that from you. And when I see you next in Oakland, I'll give it back to you. And I was like, you can get one there. She was like, no, I want yours. So, passing the torch and the legacy. So I just wanted to bring that into the room. Hopefully, don't take up too much time. But so look, in terms of history, there's a tremendous amount of history that does not go and has not been adequately recorded. Let's start with that, number one. And you can see why, looking at how the resistance to this genocide in the United States has fundamentally been wiped out, right, and whited out of any mainstream press. Where I'm at in Mississippi, most folks in Mississippi don't know that y'all took the bridge a couple of weeks ago. Ain't been one word or one mention about it. Or that there's activities going on in Mississippi, throughout Louisiana, throughout the country, throughout the empire, and it's totally being excluded. And this is by design. We need to be clear about that. But I want to point to a couple of just critical things to really highlight some of the pieces that emanate from here. So I'm going to tell a story from what I understand about some of the direct solidarity and engagement that took place with the Black Panther Party for self-defense and Palestinians. So many of y'all may or may not know. Let me just tell the perspective if you don't know. So in 1967 and 68, a good number of folks from the Black Panther Party throughout the country were forced both underground and overseas. And one of the places that many folks wind up kind of gathering and congregating at who were in exile was in Algeria. And Algeria initially, having gone through a revolution of its own in the transformation process and some elements of kind of counter struggle and internal struggle within their own project, their own revolutionary project, they were kind of questioning some of the credentials of who are these forces calling themselves black revolutionaries, right? Because the international media and press, the same piece, didn't convey or a lot of information as to who these folks are. And guess who was some of the translators of our struggle, the black liberation struggle, to the Algerian government? It was several Palestinian forces who was like, no, these folks are legitimate. And let us help you understand the nature of the black liberation struggle in the United States and to put it in clear context as an anti-imperialist struggle. And so if you want to look some of this up, look for some of the stuff with Brother Cox, who was part of the international kind of brigade and some of those stuff. And there's other kind of tales, some side stuff that you might get from Kathleen Cleaver and her experience in Algeria. There's a few films. The films don't talk about this because it's more of like a highlight of their conversation. But put it in context, if folks don't know, during that period, there were several states on the African continent which were providing not only kind of rear-based support area for other liberation movements throughout the world. One was Tanzania, right? Another one for a good period of time was Ghana until Nkrumah was overthrown. Another was Guinea under Sekou Touré. And guess what the fourth one was? It was in Algeria, where movements, particularly the Palestinian left, had bases there that they were able to operate from and be able to have some level of security in place to meet and gather. And so when you look at some of these films that are out there, recognize, I want you all to go look some of this up. You'll see some of the Palestinian left forces in the background on some of these films. If you pay close attention and know what to look for, they are there, being in direct dialogue, not only with the Black Panthers, but other forces in the Black liberation movement, exchanging experiences, exchanging knowledge, and devising ways on how to move forward. And that winds up leading a critical foundation within the Black liberation movement that enabled the creation of an organization, or a coalition, I should say, called the African Liberation Support Committee, which was one of the key forces that brought ALD, African Liberation Day, into kind of an international practice in the early 1970s. And if you want to look at some of the sharpest analysis that black folks started to begin to have around Palestine, there's one a phase that starts in 1967, there's another phase that starts basically in 1973, and that winds up forming a direct series of partnerships which carry over into like the World Conference Against Racism, both 1 and 2, that had two kind of clear focuses, where there was a clear kind of a third world alliance, which we need to look at again in some fundamental ways. And the first two conferences had two focuses. One was apartheid in South Africa, and the other one was making sure that the world stood on a united platform on the fact that Zionism is racism. Okay, Zionism and racism, that was something that our combined forces were able to pull together as a standard definition of acceptance within the United States, within the United Nations, until I think it was 1998. And so to understand this whole now new equation that to criticize Israel is somehow to be anti-Semitic, understanding that this is part of a deliberate long-term campaign to flip the script to enable the settler colonial project to not be questioned at all. But there was a counter history that we need to be grounded and rooted in, and this is just a part of it, and we were in definite solidarity. I didn't even talk about the Jewish component in that, but a clear component that is like underground history, acquired history that's not spoken about enough, that we need to make more clear and transparent and reflective of both our common and shared interests, and to be able to engage in clear, struggle going forward together.
Thank you. Thank you, Kali. No, I think it's working. I just want to build on that. I want to go to Kat, because can you bring us up to more present time, like 2008, 2009, and kind of walk us through more recent history of examples of this kind of solidarity, building on what Kali just talked about?
I think this works. Can you all hear me? Dope. I mean, I can, and I'm looking in the room, and there are several people in the room that could answer this question. Kali mentioned that this is the birthplace of the Black Panther Party, the Anti-Police Terror Project. It's annoying to talk with that thing on. The Anti-Police Terror Project, our politics, right? Because organizing has got to be rooted in politics. Our politic is rooted in the politics of the Black Panther Party. And a piece of that politic is international struggle, international solidarity. So I don't know that it would have ever occurred to us to not be in solidarity with Palestine or any oppressed peoples anywhere in the world, being so clear that our liberation is bound up all together, right? Or the more recent phrase, none of us are free until what? That part. But to take it to 2009, and I don't feel like I need to repeat this story, but every time I ask a room of people that I'm talking to, who is Oscar Grant, or do you know who Oscar Grant is, the amount of hands that go up are less and less. And it's not because Oscar's life doesn't matter. It's because that was 14 years ago. Law enforcement in this country murders 1,200 to 1,400 people every single year. So 1,200 on the low end times 14 is, I'm an actress and an activist, I don't do math, but that said, on January 1st, 2009, I think the room knows, can I just see a show of hands, right? We know what happened on January 1st, 2009. Everybody? Because I don't see everybody's hand up, and I don't want nobody to be left out of the conversation. No, and it's okay. Thank you. So on January 1st, 2009, a young man named Oscar Grant went to San Francisco with his girlfriend and some friends for New Year's Eve. I guess technically it was December 31st, 2008. He took the BART train because his mother, Mama Wanda, told him it would be safer. On his way home, something popped off on the train between him and his group and another group of folks, and the BART police were called. And very quickly, BART police showed up pulled Oscar and his friends off the train, called them a series of racial slurs, slammed Oscar on the platform, handcuffed him, and shot him in the back. Because it was New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, there were a lot of people on that platform. And they caught that modern day lynching of that young black man on their phones. And it was also sort of the advent or right when social media was really starting to be, right, people were sharing videos, etc. It went viral and the people of Oakland took the streets. In righteous rage, I might add. And then what that set off was a protracted struggle with the state for justice, and I use that term very loosely, because the only justice would be Oscar Grant III sitting in this audience, but justice for Oscar Grant, where many members of the Oakland community were at literal war with not just the Oakland Police Department, but the Alameda County Sheriffs and every other law enforcement agency that they could bring in here. I remember there used to be a parking lot off of 8th and Broadway, and for a year, it was full of black cars, and you would see the alphabet soup getting out of their cars and going to prepare or whatever at OPD. Anyway, that was also the time of Arab Spring. Right, so as the struggle for justice for Oscar exploded here, struggle exploded there as well. And a lot of folks know the story about Ferguson, right, when those young activists were in the streets demanding the right to breathe as black people and being brutalized by the Ferguson Police Department, that Palestinian freedom fighters helped educate them on how to deal with tear gas, right, how to be at war with your oppressor. That happened here in 2009. And for me, that was my first actual interaction with international solidarity in the truest sense of the word. And there was communication between us and there and here, and uplifting each other's struggles in that moment in real time. And since that time, right, the Anti-Police Terror Project, other black-led organizations, AROC, Palestinian Youth Movement, etc. We've built a solidarity where we show up for each other at protests, at city council meetings, at marches, online, right, together, understanding that our liberation struggles are bound, not primarily because the violence of colonialism resonates deeply in the DNA of all oppressed people, and then also because there's a very direct link between the work we do to eradicate state terror and the fight against the Israeli government, because the Israeli government literally trains law enforcement agencies, not just all over America, but all over the globe, how to hunt, kill, subdue us, and particularly how to subdue protest. How to curb the enthusiasm, if you will, of folks that have the audacity to demand their right to breathe, right? So it's not like this issue over here and that issue over there. These issues are combined. And Palestinian liberation is a liberation for all of us from state violence and the training of agents of the state on how to terrorize us in our communities.
I want to build off something really quickly that Kat is talking about, because how many people were here in the Bay in 2008 and 2009? Okay, so we remember that in 2009, what was happening also? What was happening in Gaza specifically, right, during that time? So there was an invasion, right? They were being terrorized similar to now. And so I want to just name a quick example. When I was at Eastside, after the murder of Oscar Grant, who was a student at Eastside, right? He used to come by. We knew his family. I only want to share this because it's very similar. This is, when we do this work, people need to understand what the consequences, what the reactions will be, and they haven't changed their playbook that much. But at Eastside, we decided to do a couple things. We had an event that was linking the two types of state terror, right? State terror that Kat just named, and what was happening in Gaza in occupied historical Palestine. And we also came out with 2 posters. And and I really think it was the posters actually that did it, less of the event. But and these posters, one of them, Melanie Cervantes, Dignidad Rebelde, and Jesus, they created a beautiful poster. Many of us have it. And it basically linked the murder of Oscar Grant and what was happening currently in Gaza, and then another poster that had the Israeli flag and was talking about making those linkages. And instantly, our funders, a particular funder, a Bay Area funder, who has since tried to, whatever the word is, atone, I'm not sure what it is, whatever, I'm not sure. But they instantly contacted us and told us that what we were doing was anti-Semitic, we needed to cancel the event, we needed to pull the posters, blah, 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 ... We needed to have these meetings with JCRC, okay? So we're gonna talk about JCRC, we need to talk about this. And they put us through all of this. We had to do all this kind of stuff. We didn't pull anything, we kept on with the event, they pulled our funding. But I name this because this is not a unique story. This happened to Hombres Unidos, this happened to so many other organizations. I wanna just talk about the power of cultural intervention in our solidarity work, right? Our funders knew that Eastside was pro-Palestinian from like however long. This wasn't a new thing. What was new, however, that I think very much bothered them and concerned them was the linkages that we were making that Kali and Kat are talking about. The linkages of what is happening here with oppressed communities, particularly Black and brown communities, in state violence, in police terror, and what's happening internationally. It was that connection that we captured on a poster for multiple people to see, to pass out, to download, to distribute, right? It was that cultural intervention that concerned them enough that they pulled our funding. And we have never gotten that funding since, right? Fuck them, it doesn't matter. But it's important to understand that. And so I just want to add in this layer of when we think of solidarity, it's all of these things we mentioned, but our cultural workers are vital to this conversation, right? Our cultural work is vital because they are using cultural work as well. That is it's a strategy that they understand, and it's a strategy that they fear in our solidarity work. Okay, I want to pass it to you, Sarah. Yeah? Nadya? Either one. Nadya, get in here. Why don't you use the good mic? This mic is funny style. I feel like you can't hear as well. Yeah, okay. They're like, use the good mic. We can't hear. Thank you, Nadya.
Maybe it's not a good mic anymore.
Okay. Never mind, okay.
Use the bad.
I'll use the bad mic? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little echoey and I'm pretty loud. Okay. If I need to change, please let me know, folks in the back. Okay. Well, it really is a privilege to be here, and it's extremely difficult, as it was 2 months ago, to talk about ourselves and our people back home, and it's also our responsibility. And so it's funny that you all bring up 2008, 2009 for a couple of reasons personally. The Palestinian Youth Movement Bay Area chapter, which was the first chapter founded in the so-called United States, was actually founded on the precipice of 2008, 2009. So December 2008, early 2009, because of Operation Cast Lead in Gaza. And actually,
You don't need it.
no, I think I don't. The rallies from 2008, 2009 specifically around the murder and execution of Oscar Grant is the earliest memory that many of us have as PYM organizers here, other than trying to uplift what was happening in terms of the Israeli onslaught of Gaza. Central to, so I don't think it's a chance or a mistake or just, random that the first PYM chapter in the so-called United States was founded in the Bay Area. And I don't just say that because I'm born and raised here and I'm really proud of it. It's because there's a long radical history of joint struggle and people struggles, progressive movements here, which Kali and Kat, maisha and
Sarah, I mean, many of us can speak to, or we're lucky enough to be raised up in. What happened in terms of the Palestinian Youth Movement is in 2008, 2009, it was founded actually off of the campus of San Francisco State University. Again, not a mistake, right? Not by chance. Bringing in, basically centralizing Palestinians who had been out in the streets around Casled and saying, hey, there's this organization called the PYM, we're grassroots transnational. We were founded in the camps in Syria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and in Palestine, and we want to open up a chapter here because we, Palestinians and diaspora, are part of our national liberation struggle. We are not in solidarity with our people, we are our people. The national liberation struggle doesn't exist unless we pick it up. And so trying to also address the things that many of us can speak to, which is the sickness of diaspora, right? How does that impact us individually? How does it impact us collectively? To have to live in the belly of the beast, in the heart of empire, but also being estranged from our homeland, estranged from our families, estranged from our people. And so we found truly a haven in the worst of times with our siblings in struggle who are waging anti-colonial struggle from inside the United States. And that's something that we inherited as the PYM and as Palestinians who you see out in the streets today from many organizations, right? AROC, PYM, Dream Defenders. We inherited the struggles that Carly and Kat just spoke to. And we're lucky that we get to build on it, understanding that Palestinian solidarity, we have made the choice to be in solidarity with Africa and her diaspora, and vice versa. I learn stories every time I speak to somebody that are oral histories because of what Khalid's speaking about, you know, the deficiency of the written record, because many of this work was clandestine. One thing, if I might just kind of finish up the story of PYM. So 2009, I joined in 2014. Around the same time as the formation of the Oakland to Palestine Solidarity Mural that we were lucky enough to help put together. In 2014, there was a conference of Palestinians in Tunisia, and because of what Kat mentioned, the Arab Spring, PYM actually combusted at that time and all of our chapters collapsed except for the one in the Bay. So I joined as a young person, fresh off of UC Santa Cruz campus, where we were under or implicated in a federal investigation by a Title VI investigation that was run by Kenneth Marcus. Y'all remember him? He was under Betsy DeVos in the Trump administration. So he was a young bucking lawyer. And at the time, he was saying that our organizing on campus at UC Santa Cruz, UC Irvine, and UC Berkeley actually physically threatened the lives of Jewish students. So for 3.5 years, we were under this heel of federal investigation. At the end, we were found not guilty. Surprise. We'll get back to this in terms of connecting anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism as if they're the same thing. But it's part of a larger trajectory. So in 2014, the entire body of PYM collapsed, and the last chapter that was standing was the Bay Area. And so from the Bay Area, something that we had often informed the rest of our chapters about internationally was the concept of joint struggle. Because we were student it here, and we have a long history of it, alhamdulillah, in terms of our actual lineage, right? And so you can see in terms of the way that we've been handling the genocide on the ground, both emotionally, spiritually, politically, right? Thinking about the material, the psychological impacts. We come from a revolutionary struggle and we haven't lost that character. People are willing to die to stay on the land. Israel's talking about Gaza and the incarceration of our people in an open-air prison as if that's Egypt's problem, right? So we've been saying humanitarian corridors. The Zionist state says no, transfer these people. Thank you.
The Israeli state says, the Zionist state says, no, transfer these people to Egypt. I'm like, who has the keys to the prison? Israel, right? So the demand is the same as it was 75 years ago. Let us go home. When we speak about, Carly, when you said 1967, right, an awakening, 1973, a story that I was told at SF State when Chief Zweli Mandela came, he spoke about how in 1972, ahead of Yom Kippur War, or the onslaught of the Sinai, the apartheid state of South Africa shipped tanks all the way up. They were supposed to go to Israel. And the Polisario movement, the Sahrawi people who are being occupied by Morocco at this time, actually intercepted 2 of those tanks. And those tanks still are there in front of their camps, right? The Polisario also host their governance in Algeria. And it's, in terms of Algeria, that the FLN, right, or the Algerian Liberation Movement in the 1950s, was the first movement who taught us as Palestinians how to fight. So when you see an ongoing prospect of guerrilla warfare, any sort of Palestinian resistance historically, contemporarily, we really thank the Algerians for supporting us in a moment when we didn't have power, we had very little to offer, and just like now, there's a big risk in supporting Palestine, right? And yet we do it anyways, because what's gained initially from supporting any of us that have lost struggles or lost causes, right? Which is a psychological intention to make us think that we're gonna lose on our moment of victory. I want to speak quickly, if I can, to the massacre that happened yesterday in Shujaiya. Have folks heard about that? Here's the thing about our struggle. We are so honored that people see us, understand us, and want to learn more about us. And we feel that folks are actually holding this collective grief, right? With a different proximity to it. Shujaiya, if we speak about 2008, 2009, there was a massacre in Shujaiya. This is the psychological operations of the Israeli military. There's the strategy and there's the psyops, right? Again, talking about the psychology of defeat. There was a massacre in Shujaiya where soldiers marched into Shujaiya. They shot over 200 people in the stomach in immediate length, and there were oral histories that were told just in Arabic. Mind you, we're getting much better at translating these things into English now, right? But in 2008, 2009, Israeli soldiers went into the homes of Shujaiya, of the people of Shujaiya, and they told mothers, they separated them from one side and they separated their kids on the other, and they told them, you have 10 kids, pick 5. Which ones do you want to live? And they killed their children in front of them. Methodologically, this is the story of Shujaiya. For those of us who can read Arabic, who can understand Arabic, there are multiple layers to every single video you're seeing, because we can hear in our dialect people suffering. And these are the stories of Shujaiya. In 2014, Shujaiya was targeted again. 1,500 people were killed in multiple airstrikes in Shujaiya 2 days ago. And that is part of the psychological ops that the Israeli military is participating in. We may not win this moment of liberation, but we, the Palestinian people, will be victorious. And it is exactly the type of repression that we see at this moment that is actually a sign of weakness. And it's the same historically. They've tried to repress us, they've killed our movement leaders, they've gone time and time again to try and imprison the bravest of us, the clearest of us, the most dignified. And yet, we are still here, and we are relentless. And that is the legacy that we come from. So for joint struggle and thinking of what the future of solidarity holds, just to really reaffirm, not only did the murder of Oscar Grant really help revolutionize me as a Bay Area kid who saw myself and see myself in him, But it also continues to grow. These things have roots and they have futures. The last thing I'll say is, do folks remember the murder of Iyad Halak in Jerusalem? He has cousins here in the Bay. So Uncle Bobby X, when the murder of Iyad happened, where he was shot in the back running away in 2011, I think. 2000, anyways, I'll remember the exact date. Uncle Bobby X, oh, I'm sorry. That's Oscar Grant's uncle. Great. He joined us in a conversation with the family of Iyad Halak and spoke to how bereaved family circles kind of operate here, and I believe got inspiration for the new formations coming up here to support families who have been impacted by police violence based on the prototype that we have in Palestine. Because so many of our people are murdered, like here. So many of our people are imprisoned, like here. That we have grassroots networks and community formations in order to pertain to the resiliency of these communities who are being targeted, right? We're being killed in Jerusalem because they want us to leave. We're being killed in 48 because they want us to leave, right? And so being able to take up the question of grief as a collective one, being able to take up our struggle in the question of a collective one, that's part of what has given us as Palestinians strength. The carceral system in Israel, the same as here, is intended to individualize us and separate us. So it's of the utmost importance that we maintain that character so that even as we're seeing 22,000 Palestinians die and many more who will pay the ultimate price with their life, and we have 10,000 people in prison, there's still one of us, two of us, three of us, four of us. We still remain and we will still fight like hell. Because we have said there's no peace without justice, and there's no justice without return, period.
I know we're spending a lot of time on this question, and I want to bring you, Sara, into the conversation. I want you, if you could talk about what Jewish participation has looked like historically, what it looks like now, particularly the role of Zionism within Jewish progressive movements, within Jewish organizing, and how it's used to attack progressive. And then, solidarity.
Yeah, so, I think I want to start with your question of lineage. And in every moment, we have a choice which lineages we choose to stand on and take forward, and which we decide to diverge from. And, hearing your story of Palestinian mothers being asked which of her kids should live, were the stories, thank you, Kat, that my great-grandparents and grandparents told about the Nazi genocide when people were forced to make similar choices. And so as Jewish people, the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network was founded on the idea that it is itself a form of anti-Semitism, that Zionism has deep in its roots, to take that history and use it against other people in the way that it was used against us. And so the confrontation of Zionism is actually part of the confrontation of anti-Semitism, and we stand on the history of Jewish people who fought against our own persecution, but also were part of collective liberation struggles. But there are also lineages of Jewish history in which Jewish people participated with the ruling elite, with empire, thinking somehow it was going to protect us, when in fact it was just part of being used against other people, but also ultimately against ourselves. And Israel is just the state version of that history. So when we were building the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network right after the Second Intifada, and we went around the world, we went to Palestine, we went to Lebanon, we spoke to our comrades here from and MXGM, we spoke to South Africans, and we just said, is there a usefulness of an international, speaking of internationalism, anti-Zionist Jewish force to confront Zionism as an international mechanism that is used to advance white supremacy, apartheid, and Israel itself has an economy based on the repression industry that, like this country does with people of color and indigenous people and immigrants, they develop that technology on Palestinians, and on the Israeli websites say that they practice it in real time. That's their marketing strategy. And when we talk to people, particularly people in Palestine, they said, yes, we need an international anti-Zionist force to combat Zionism, but it's not, initially we were called the International Jewish Solidarity Network, and they challenged us, a lot of Palestinians, and they said, we don't really need Jewish solidarity to fight our struggle. We don't need that from you. We have international solidarity all over the world. We do need you to be part of a left collective liberation struggle against these forces of history that have targeted Jewish people for so long and that now you're participating in. You have to take that history back and fight it for your own selves and history, as well as to be in solidarity with not only the Palestinian struggles, but the struggles in the places that we live. And because Zionism, it's not just ideological, as everyone said and as Kat said. We share common enemies. And so the Israeli military trains police forces all over the world, but also arms, provides strategy to undermine people's liberation struggles all over the world, and they usually do it in collaboration with the United States. Israel creates 60% of the world's drones. Drones. And that technology, as we know, is used against populations all over the world. As Kat said, population control is one of the specialties, but it's also used to repress people's movements. And then what we'll talk about a little later is organizations like the Jewish Community Relations Council are part of networks that are not only attacking the Palestinian struggle, of course that's their first and foremost priority, but the people who fund backlash against the Palestinian struggle are funding backlash against all of our struggles, right? And the organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, which how many people here have heard of the Anti-Defamation League? Yes. Stop the Anti-Defamation League. The Anti-Defamation League, like the Jewish Community Relations Council, fronts as a Jewish organization. The Anti-Defamation League in particular has marketed itself as an anti-hate organization. As many people in this room know, they are one of the chief vehicles for not only defending Israel, but Islamophobia. And in the 1990s, during the anti-apartheid struggle, they understood, like Maisha said, they understand how powerful joint struggle is. So they hired a South African agent to spy on 1,000 social justice organizations. This is a very famous case. A lawyer here, Mark Vanderhout, tried that case and won. The Anti-Defamation League hired this South African agent to spy on organizations, particularly around anti-apartheid, but also the farm workers' struggle, literally 1,000 organizations. Why did they do that? because they understood that the success of those movements directly gave power to the Palestinian struggle, and the Palestinian struggle gives power to all of our movements for justice. And so their objective is to divide us and separate us. I will tell one more story. Malcolm X Grassroots, IJAN, and actually the Palestinian Youth Movement were in Geneva at the World Conference on Racism, and this was after Durban. And in Durban, the United States refused to participate in Durban, saying it was because of this equation, Zionism equals racism. What else were they bringing to Durban? They were bringing a resolution for reparations for slavery in the United States. The United States used Palestine to prevent having to be accountable and give due reparations to people in the United States. And then they blamed the Palestinian struggle for dividing and not giving black people what they deserve. They set the whole thing up. And so together we are literally stronger, but also we play into their hands when we're not together. And so our work, and so then in Geneva, they tried to do the same thing, right? And we came together and had a counter conference, and it's been a long time coming, but the fact that organizations like JCRC have to name that they are Zionist. At the Oakland resolution, they kept saying, we are Zionist. They never had to do that. They always got to cover up their ideology and the racism behind it. It is our victory that they have to say it. It's our victory that they're criminalizing anti-Zionism. And it's our job to make sure that people understand how central anti-Zionism is to anti-racism, not just ideologically, but practically. And so I will pause there.
I know, we'll see if this works. Is this working as well? Yeah? In the back? Okay. I hope y'all are taking notes, because this is, that was the first question. That was the first question. So I will do better as a moderator, but I didn't want to, this history is so important, right? Because why do we need to understand our history?
So we can organize adequately right now.
Right, because we are learning in this moment. And so I want to move us into current conditions. Actually, Sara, you set us up brilliantly in talking about the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, the JCRC. So I want to do a couple things. I want us to kind of quickly break down what are we facing, what's different about what we're facing in this moment than these past moments that you all have so brilliantly articulated. What's different? Who are we talking about? And I want to specify that to the Bay, because what's happening now, we need to be in both and right now, right? There's no either or. We don't have the luxury. We don't have the power, honestly. We do, but we haven't marshaled it in the ways that we need to. So we're operating both and. So if you could keep some of I want to think about here in the Bay in particular, because we have some particular targets, and we've already mentioned JCRC. So if we can, Sara, anyone can detail that. But what are the conditions right now? What are we facing? What's different in this moment than what we have seen? And anyone can start.
Yeah, I can start. Thank y'all for letting me kind of go all over the place with the last question. In terms of repression, I think a couple of things that are happening nationally, globally, and are exampled in the Bay are the way that the Zionist apparatus is going after our students in particular, and they're empowered by a Senate bill, right, trying to illegalize an SJP, or the National Students for Justice in Palestine. I just gave y'all the story about the federal investigation of UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, and UC Santa Cruz. We know that SJP was founded at Berkeley, right? Why are they going after our students and our youth? Because they're the leadership of our struggle, as youth and students historically have been. We can talk about the Organization of African Students, right? Long history, continues to be so. The JCRC, as Sarah mentioned, is part of a larger network that engages in lawfare. So I was witnessing at court in San Francisco, the lawfare project, literally what they're called, like warfare but using the law. Charming. So the lawfare project engaging in a lawsuit against Rabab Abdelhadi, right, professor at San Francisco State University, where they used our case as precedence, even though they lost it. So Canary Mission, have folks heard of Canary Mission? We don't know 100% who funds it. Oh, Canary Mission, the blacklist that the first profiles were at UC Santa Cruz, us as students on campus, in order to deem us as anti-Semites. They would put up a profile of you. Please do not go visit the website and give them more traffic. But they put up your picture. They put up erroneous information about you, things that you may or may not have said on Twitter. They connect you to as many different radical Palestinian factions as they can find. Really, like today in the news, not understanding the difference between Hamas and Al-Qaeda and ISIS at all, because we're all the same, right? And then at its inception would actually call jobs or universities, places where we were as students, and say, hello, we are Canary Mission. We have this website where we've profiled this person who you are going to hire, who's a student at your university. Did you know that they are a raging anti-Semite? So this has been the perpetual history of doxing, right? Also of repression, things that we saw from McCarthy era, Vietnam War, right? Here we are today. So the JCRC, we do know, is one of the primary funders of Canary Mission. They are located here. So what's different about this moment is that they're having to change their strategy because Palestine isn't just a struggle or an event that people know about now, right? Or knew about before, maybe. It's popularized. People know Palestine. And unfortunately for them, the majority of us who are 35 and under are pro-Palestine, right? Vehemently. So the youth are all right. We're just fine. Also, we can see in the polls that POC, or people of color in the United States, are vehemently pro-Palestine. That's right. And we can see that 80% of Democratic voters and 55% of Republican voters are pro-Palestine, or at least pro-ceasefire. Now, what does that mean in terms of who is Zionist? For the JCRC and the ADL, who have been trying to say, we're progressive, we're multiracial, we form these different types of coalitions that represent all different types of people, they're left with the old white folks. Doesn't look good. And you can see that in terms of the rally, the pro-Israel rally that was in Washington, D.C. I mean, they had a bunch of supremacists on the stand and then Van Jones. Who did we have? We had people coming who we didn't even ask them to speak because we didn't want to put people out. Folks were coming by the numbers in order to offer their solidarity. And we had over 500,000. What did they have, 100,000? So the JCRC and the Zionist lobby has to change their strategy because they're being revealed as the conservatives that they are. And they're being revealed as the racists that they are. And we're also at this moment needing to, I think, expand our strategy in terms of long-term short-term effectiveness, long-term planning, because a movement that makes it through this moment is the one that's gonna be stronger, right? That's our goal, to not get caught up in the immediacy. Yep. And I think fundamentally, we have to change our strategy. It's the first time that I'm hearing not just Islamophobia, but also anti-Palestinian racism, right? Because not all of us are Muslim. And we are being targeted not just because of war on terror and because we are all culturally Muslim, okay, and that's our region, but also because we are Palestini, we're Palestinian. And so I'll pass it to Sarah in a second, but really it's a core understanding that we as Palestinian people, no matter where we are, whether we're quiet, whether we're loud, whether we're organizing, whether we're in hiding, Zionism is going to come for us because we represent the future of our struggle. So long as we exist and we're able to understand who we are, we're able to understand and organize around our central political demands, right? Not just the right to clean water and food and freedom of movement, which all human beings should have, but our political rights as Palestinian people, the things that unite us, that we cannot barter or sell, right? Freedom for Palestine, from the river to the sea, liberation of our homeland, generation after generation until total liberation. The freedom for all political prisoners, the freedom, the self-determination of our people, right? And the return of all refugees. So those are our central political demands. I didn't decide that. The PLO decided that. And the Palestinian Authority, as much as they might try, cannot barter that away. And so that's why Zionism is coming for us, because they want to eradicate the issue and they haven't figured out how to kill all of us or how to kill our spirit, even in Gaza. So I'll pass it to you just in terms of continuing this idea. How do we actually shift our strategy and what's different? I think what's different is that we're stronger than ever before. And because we're being more effective, we know the state doesn't rest. Their attempts of different forms of repression are going to continue. But there's a lot more of us than there are of them.
So I think just building off of that, one of the things that's different is that we can actually have this fight on explicit terms. And like you said, JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, has 125 chapters across the United States. And they claim to represent all Jewish people. They increasingly represent fewer and fewer Jewish people. The majority of young Jewish people don't identify with the state of Israel in almost any polls that you do, which doesn't mean that there aren't young Zionists on campus who are documenting their fellow students and faculty and reporting to Canary Mission. But one of the things we're seeing right now is for a long time, like, we named ourselves the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network 20 years ago as a speech act, to be able to return to what in the 1960s was the Zionism equals racism equation, anti-Zionism equals anti-racism, not anti-Semitism. That was the Oslo process really tried to eliminate the anti-Zionist spectrum and goals of the Palestinian liberation struggle. And so now they are explicitly revealing themselves as virulent racists. They're not even trying to cover it up. They're naming themselves as Zionists, and so we can actually have the fight on anti-Zionist terms. Like you would have a fight on anti-racist terms. You know, we're not non-racist, we're anti-racist. And so I think that's a real opportunity, and I think the way that PYM and AROC and the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network and Jewish Voice for Peace and hopefully all of us are able to just call out organizations like JCRC for the racists they are and work together to exclude the Jewish Community Relations Council for coalitions they try to join. Like every Martin Luther King Day, they host events with black churches. That's offensive. Right? That's offensive to the black liberation struggle. It is offensive when they're part of anti-Asian hate coalitions, when they are the biggest spreaders of hate against Southwest Asian, North African people. So we have to do that work. And I would say as Jewish people, what we're asking, particularly of non-Jewish people, is take on those organizations. Don't allow them into your spaces and our spaces. And you need us to do that maybe because of the way they come after us, but we really do need to work together on that, and we need to broaden the platform of people. And you have the voices of many Jewish people saying, if you want to actually not participate in anti-Semitism, you have to combat Zionism. Zionists have collaborated and continue to collaborate with the biggest anti-Semites. And we can't get back into history, but they courted the Nazis. They courted the Tsar of Russia. That's what they do. And now they're working with the Christian Zionists who fund more, they send more money to Israel than any of the rest of us combined, including Jewish Zionists. And their goal is to get all the Jewish people back to Israel so that we can all be killed when, what is it called? The second coming. The rapture, whatever, the rapture. So we're all in the same struggle. Zionism has no place in it. Israel has no place in it. And we have to stop being uncomfortable with naming that explicitly. And I think when Jewish people say they feel unsafe, it's really important to name the difference between discomfort and unsafety. You should be very uncomfortable supporting a state that says that it speaks for you and that is committing genocide right now. And so that should make you uncomfortable. Yes, that's uncomfortable. That doesn't mean you're unsafe, right? So I think, who's unsafe right now? People in Gaza, people in Palestine, people of color in this country who are unsafe every single day in this country. So I think that's the moment we have, is to be bold, to be clear, and to be unapologetic in our confrontation of Zionism and Israel's state policies and practices, and the way the U.S. benefits from that and funds it. And so that's what I think we have an opportunity to do on no uncertain terms. Okay.
Not fully formed, but getting there. The first thing that I want to talk about is actually what is not different in this moment. And from where I sit as an artist, as a storyteller, as a narrator, some people call me a journalist. I think I'm just an activist that somebody fucked up and gave a platform to. But nevertheless, I'm very keenly aware of the power of that platform, right? That I am speaking to people that are listening attentively to everything I say, everything the guests that I choose to bring on my show says. I'm keenly aware of the fact that language and narrative and story create our communities, our ideology, our politics, our policies, our world. What is not different in this moment, and what even may be even just a little bit more egregious, is the complicity. And not just, I'm not gonna say just of mainstream media, because Fox News gonna do what Fox News gonna do. Breitbart gonna do what Breitbart gonna do. I want to talk about CNN. I want to talk about MSNBC. And since Sister Maisha said, let's keep it in the Bay, I'm going to talk about the San Francisco Chronicle. The danger of white liberal media is what is not different in this moment. A newspaper, yeah, go ahead, because we need to make some noise for that, because actually, it's abhorrent. It's abhorrent that a protest of thousands of people could take place right in front of the San Francisco Chronicle's building, and they would have the audacity the next day to say a couple of hundred folks showed up. It is abhorrent, and I've really been sitting with this question, and I think I asked it in one of the interviews I did on Law and Disorder, that so-called journalists would repeat the lies of the Israeli state about the things that happened on October 7th. And then not have a pathway to hold them accountable for the genocide that they helped set in motion. That is what is not different in this moment. What is different in this moment, for the good or the bad, and I think the next thing I'm going to talk about will lean sort of into the bad, is that all of us actually have the power in this room to impact narrative. You don't have to have a journalist credential. You don't have to be employed by a newsroom. You got Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. I'm sure other shit that I'm too old to know about. And the right has figured that out. They have figured out that while you're sitting at dinner with your auntie, you could literally be creating a headline that goes viral. And that's what they have done. I mean, that's part of why that platform that I will never call X, I just can't do it, has become such a cesspool. But it's a powerful cesspool, because I track what posts get likes and reshared and all of that stuff. It is doing the job of informing, and not just informing, but inciting and manipulating truth and reality. So what is different in this moment is not just me up here as a journalist that has the ability to impact the conversations that we're having or the truths that we're telling. It's that every single one of you that are like, well, what can I do? You can go tell the truth. You can tell the truth. I think I said earlier, you know, I've stood in solidarity with Palestine for a long time now, and so Zionists, like every once in a while, they get a hair up their ass and they come for me, and it's, you know, whatever. I'm not upset. Fuck them. Give no shits. I'm actually just trying to formulate the right sentence. My feelings in this moment about how Zionists act are absolutely irrelevant, right? What I am sitting here disgusted about, what is different in this moment is that we are having political conversations in Oakland that I don't think any of us would have thought possible 10 years ago. If you would have told me 10 years ago that a bunch of people that looked like me would be standing on the steps of the police department, utilizing a slogan that was created to uplift dead black bodies in order to reinstate a corrupt police chief, I would have laughed in your face. If you would have told me that we would have black faces parroting right-wing, violent, nasty, racist, misogynist, homophobic, transphobic shit and building a base here, I would have laughed in your face. And it's the building the base part I want you to pay attention to. Because I think a lot of us are like, we don't gotta pay attention to them. This is Oakland, it'll never happen. Let me tell you, it is happening. It is happening right now. So in this moment, yeah, the Zionists, right, are easy to identify. Even, I think one dude, I know one Zionist had a sign that says Zionist and single. I was so confused. But there are right-wing forces that are trying to exploit this moment while saying that they care about the lives of both Palestinians and Israelis to attack the progressive leaders that dare to stand on the right side of history. That is what is happening in this moment. Councilmember Carol Fife is a black revolutionary woman. Yeah, you can give it up for Councilmember Carol Fife. She is my sister. She is my daughter calls her other mother. I have been in the trenches with that woman for 15 years. Some of y'all put her in office and said she got it and walked away. She was already taking heat for being unapologetic about standing for black and brown and indigenous and poor and queer and disabled people and renters and, yeah. Watching the conflation of Zionism and anti-blackness in this moment, that Zionists feel empowered to utilize black faces to put forth anti-black tropes in this moment, and that white people who may or may not be Zionists but are pro the state of Israel because they're anti-anything and everything brown and didn't have the courage or felt like they would last 2 seconds in Oakland saying that out loud, now have a cover. That is what is different in this moment. And we have got to organize accordingly. All skin folk and kinfolk. And yes, this is the birthplace of the Black Panther Party, but that does not mean that we are immune to the forces of white supremacy who see this current moment as an opportunity to topple our progressive ideology and agenda and replace it with their own. My sister, Dr. Melina Abdullah, says she's not a conspiracy theorist, she's a conspiracy realist. I like that, I steal it. I was clear even before this moment that they were coming for us. Because as we go, so does the nation. The birth, the defund, the birth of this iteration of the fight against state terror, the unapologetic solidarity place for the Palestinian liberation struggle. If they take us down, it makes it that much easier for them to take our comrades around the country down. So we are being targeted. And we need to understand that inside of this political moment, which is all the more reason why cross-cultural, cross-racial, cross-class, cross-issue solidarity is crucial in this moment. They can't have Oakland. I'll be dead and motherfucking buried, and I hope you will too. But listen, yes, but don't just clap. Organize and open your eyes to what is happening here in the ways in which people say that the atrocities that Israel is committing are horrific, but then turn right around and try to slam dunk the black folks, electeds, public figures, whatever you have it. Some folks should look up a Newsweek article that just came out. Look at the ways in which they will twist this issue, and how disgusting is that? How are you going to exploit the murder of 6,000 children so you can push a conservative agenda? So that is what is different in this moment. And as organizers, we have to organize accordingly. The way we organized 2 years ago is not going to work in this moment. We have to adequately and accurately assess the conditions. And I swear to God, the left, if we don't put aside our petty bullshit differences and unite right now, it's over. And it can be over here. And if it's over here, it's over for the rest of the country.
Kali, I want to bring you into the conversation. I know people have questions, and we're going to get to your questions in a second, but I'm wondering if, I know you want to respond to what we've been talking about, but if you could also respond and start to answer this question. Kat, you set it up perfectly about how, so given all the differences at this moment, then how do we engage, right? What is it that we do in strategic fashion? So I wonder if you could kind of bundle that into your response a little bit. Bundle it. Could you bundle it? You could bundle it. You wrote a book, brother. You could bundle it. You wrote a book. Yeah. You've written a book.
Turn it off. Never mind. There we go. Just gotta wait for it. So, I was prepared a few minutes ago to add something, but y'all done added to what I think needs to be addressed. So I'm gonna try to bundle as best I can. But I do want to say about like the local piece. Let me come back to that. I mean, I don't live here anymore. I used to live here. And I'm going to put the local into a larger complex, but also try to deal with what's different. On the grand scale, Israel and the United States, at least in the geopolitical sense, are more isolated now than they have been in many a moon. It is very clear, at least in terms of the mass movements of the world, through everything that you can track. And if you take the vote of the United Nations, both of them are fairly isolated. And I just don't mean in terms of like, we're going to vote against you. Like, it's very clear to the rest of the world, the international system as we knew it is fundamentally, as a result of this, it's cracking and it may be over. Like, I want y'all to really sit with that and think about the implications of it. So I want y'all to, like, right now in the United Arab Emirates, there's a bullshit conference going on called the COP28. And I want y'all to look at the positions that the United States is now articulating. They had no intention going in, and this is something I tracked and participate in. They had no intention on making the agreements that they are now making, none of which they're going to uphold. But they are now saying, we're going to get rid of all this, we're going to reduce carbon emissions, we're going to get rid of, it was two other ones that I can't remember right now that they were talking about they were going to eliminate. What's the other one? The other one we got that burns shorter, methane. Thank you. It's very clear from all the background conversation that's taking place. They are trying to curry favor in light of what they are doing in Palestine. But they are deeply isolated. Now, why is that, important in a particular way? And this is what brings it to California. So they are trying to spin the narrative that China has to do more, to make sure that the world doesn't go past 1.5. Everybody got to do more, but that's a straight up lie on a certain level. But what they brought home is this conversation that they just had here in California with Biden coming here to have a conversation with Xi Jinping around their terms of setting out new terms of how hegemony is going to be managed. Global hegemony is going to be managed. It's not an accident they had that conversation in California. Y'all do recognize, even though this economy here at this place is shifting, is transforming, it's still the 8th largest in the world. The 8th largest economy in the world is the state of California. It is no accident that DeSantis and Gavin Newsom had that bullshit debate, whatever that was about, because it's very clear to key elements within the Democratic Party that if the election was tomorrow, Biden would lose on account of what he has committed himself to in Palestine. So they are looking for some alternatives within their camp of if we need to go in a different direction Who could we line up? And your boy Gavin Newsom, they were already trying to position him to be the kind of the next runner-up. This was a little test run, and all this happened, some of it, I understand was pre-planned, but a lot of this has been rushed in account of the current situation. Now, what I'm trying to bring home is, in Mississippi, where I'm based, there's not a tremendous amount of productive capacity. Like Mississippi is a mobilizing base for U.S. imperialism, right? We have one major shipbuilding city, which is Gulfport, that we are trying to figure out how do we disrupt its capacity, because they make, the aircraft carriers there. But other than that, there's not much other than them deploying troops out of that place. Y'all are in a place that is fundamental to empire. Fundamental to empire. And as this goes on, and this is going to last sadly for a minute, there's a strategic role that the movement here has to play in disrupting the organization of empire relative to this struggle that is probably more strategic than any place else, at least in the United States. And to look at how this place is kind of laid out in the service of empire. Oakland is the logistics hub. The South Bay is the productive hub. The technology and think tank is Silicon Valley. San Francisco is the financial capital. They work entwined with each other in the service of empire on a global level. We need to figure out who in each of these areas can disrupt these various instruments of empire and their military mobilization. So on the logistics side, here, right, what level of choke points can we exercise? To what degree? To how much? To what example? On the productive side, who do we got there that we can ally with? We can put some clogs in the wheel. On the technology side, what are the different levels of technology disruption that we can engage? Message intervening, hacking, I'm gonna just say it straight up, hacking, all those different things that we could influence. And on the finance side, there's some key institutions that need to be boycotted and divested from on an active level, starting with Bank of America, which is situated still right there, right? As a gateway to China. That's what Bank of America was set up to do, if folks aren't familiar with in terms of its actual concrete history. So there's a particular way, just as someone who tries to think about strategy on a daily, that I want to implore to y'all who are situated here to take even more advances. I think from what I can see from the outside, this is some of the most advanced work that is taking place, but we can always improve our practice and be more, hard hitting in terms of what we're executing. So I just want to lay that out. I'm sure some people have been in dialogue about all this before, but if it has not been mentioned, I just want to put it into some mention, into some piece that can be acted upon. Now, the remix part. Okay, all right. Now that was just a critical a piece, that little intervention. But I do want to say, we are also on an empire-wide basis. In this case, I mean about what some of y'all mean by the United States, the country. In terms of us staying united, because there's a difficult question our movement is going to have to face in this next couple of months around this election in 2024. Let's not act like it's not going to happen. Right, and there's some folks already in the left. I saw an article that was sent to me, in the Nation, that people that who I would consider comrades who I have some differences of opinion with, put an argument out about, even though Joe Biden is a genocidal mass murderer, that we still need to support him because the alternative is going to be worse, right? No, look, this is what's out there. And if we don't start having some real conversation about, if that's what you're going to do it. But let's not at least get into a fight around that being a dividing line in the line around us stopping genocide and us further trying to deal with the issue of the liberation of Palestine. Because one of the things I'm gonna put out, this is just me personally, I don't represent a political force anymore, so I can't say it's a line, but I'm very distressed by sometimes just the call for a ceasefire. I'm just gonna say that honestly. Because if a ceasefire means just going back to the status quo, fuck that. No, that's how we got here in the first place. That's not gonna work. And this conversation about two-state, no, I don't want to hear none of that. I'm not Palestinian. I'm like, no, you can't sell me on no lie. So I think there's a role in which we got to not just call for the end of the killing, but how do we advance the piece of the resettlement to the degree you want to call anything that is going to actually advance new terms, new grounds. And this is where a broader united front, I'm gonna come back full circle, because I don't think to this degree yet, because I think it's true that we are doing more to a certain extent than we've done in a long time. The global movement in terms of its mobilization capacity is very strong. We saw that in 2020, we're seeing it now. Is it organized enough to be sustained, to actually be coordinated? No. And that's the phase that we have to get through, I think, in terms of that. How do we start actually building sustainable organization out of all of this mass mobilization that can carry the struggle forward to the next place? That's the challenge, and that's what we have to make different.
Okay, y'all. I want questions, please. Please, questions. Can we all agree on what a question is? Y'all, we've been through this before. Yes. Okay. So Thomas is going to come around. I want to encourage people. If you're used to speaking first, I want you to take a pause and just assess the room. Look around. We might have folks that aren't used to stepping up and asking questions first. I'm also going to let people think, settle in. I just want us to be conscious of how we take up space and how we don't. I'm not saying don't ask your question. Let's just take a pause. We've heard a lot of information. Where are people being more called to? What are curiosities? What are questions? Where do you want to look? We don't have to agree all the time. You know what I mean? I have a different interpretation of that Nation article than my brother Kali. But fundamentally, I agree with him on some points. We don't have to agree. But I want us to be thoughtful, rigorous, and considerate when we ask questions. Can we agree to that? Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so with that said, who has a question or curiosity that they want to ask these amazing humans on this stage? We're losing Kat. Oh, and Kat is going to have to dip out. So if people have specific questions for Kat, let's start there. Is that right?
If they do, I mean, I feel like there are other voices up here that can handle that, but if you do.
Okay, hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask, there's a lot just moving through my mind, so I really appreciate. Okay, is that better? Okay, so I just was wanting to say thank you, and there's a lot running through my mind and heart. I came in a little late, but I just wanted to know if there was any. I wanted to ask about any connections that might be drawn between solidarity with Palestine and what's happening with Cop City right now. Cop City.
Yeah, great question. I think we spoke actually a lot about the connections between Israeli military and training of U.S. police departments and forces of empire all around the world. In terms of the major law enforcement exchange program, it's actually in Georgia. It's the GILEE program, right? GILEE. And so that's the area where, Cop City is attemptably to be located. I think Sara talked earlier about Israeli weapons contractors boasting about weaponry being utilized on Palestinians. Is actually called field tested. So when you say a stamp that says field testing, it means that it's been tested on a live population of people. In most cases, that would be us. And so, yeah, the movement against Stop Cop City, the other piece is the way that repression is being formulated here. So I think specifically when we look at state RICO charges in Georgia, we have to be abundantly aware of the way, kind of like your question, Maisha, about the way that things change, right? Repression shifts, right? Whether that be accusations of conspiracy, whether that be RICO, ways to really criminalize the individuals in our movements and our movements as a whole. Those are the connections that come up for me.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of some practical pieces, trust me, there's a lot of unity that's been there from day one, long before October 7th started. The one of the key linchpins, I would say, of that unity has been an organization called Community Movement Builders. One of the founders of which is a old co-conspirator of mine, Kamal Franklin. And the analogies around Cop City and Palestine have been there in the formation, in the articulation, and the narrative from day one. But we also, myself, I lived in Atlanta for a time, worked with Sister Vanessa, who was there, was one of the key people who taught me about Gilly, Faraj. And they've been working on this campaign for many years, and it's very integral into a lot of the work that they've been doing around Cop City, and there's been a number of teach-ins, both online and in person. And they have been, it was one of the examples I was going to give currently about them being threatened, some of their funding and stuff being threatened and pulled because of their solidarity and expressed commitment to a pro-Palestinian position. So it's there.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So I have two really brief questions. First of all, when you were talking about our location here, were you referring to the weapons manufacturers and the engineers in Silicon Valley and that kind of thing? Was that?
Yes, and more.
Okay. So we're going to Lockheed Martin's office in San Francisco on Friday. Maybe you can join us. I'll talk to you later about that. I'm with Code Pink. We do disruption. That's what Code Pink does. And I'm also putting together a ceasefire resolution for the Berkeley City Council. I'm looking for people to work on with that. So I know ceasefire isn't enough. We also have to stop the funding. That's really, really important because that puts the blood on our hands. We're paying for it, this genocide. Thank you.
How does this work? This is just, okay. I just want to ask Sara, and if anybody else wants to respond, you talked about JCRC. What about APEC? Is that, because they're a major funder of all the weaponry? APAC, not APEC. We've been to APEC. APAC. Can you say a little bit about that?
So we are where we are because of everything that's happened. And I have the feeling that blood is on all of our hands because we pay taxes. We could shut the whole motherfucker down just by not being compliant. They can't lock us all up. They can't kill us all at one time. So what is the tipping point for us to come out of powerlessness, self-hating, and non-living.
Yeah, growing up in Detroit, I go back a ways too. It was the movement with Martin Luther King and the mass protests that hit the streets that changed the nation, changed the posture on so much. The Vietnam War, mass protests, finally resolved that. We always said in Detroit, what happens in Detroit, it happened in California 2 years ago, and then it comes this way. So I have to say, what's happening here is very powerful. California is a nation in itself. It's just the mentality, the cross-cultural diversity and education and of the people is a leader of the world. So I want to commend you for that. One question I have, because a lot of what's going on right now today is due to a huge media disinformation campaign across this country, because Israel really is to influence us, are the Zionists. We're their paycheck. We're the ones that keep them afloat. So Bibi, he was talking about this. He's proud of his Pegasus software. He said that's the best weapon any country could have to spy on people and manipulate them. So right now we know that corporate media is sold out, though we have a voice, but it's being stifled. So, I mean, I've just been using Facebook. I'm not into the other platforms yet, but 95% of what I post doesn't go through. Nobody responds to it. So AI is sorting that out. And then this Pegasus software. So my question is, how can we deal with this Pegasus software and this media disinformation campaign? One thing I did on my Facebook is I took pictures of Al Jazeera TV of actual the damage there, because that's not making it to our TVs, and then I put that on Facebook, and I got a couple responses before they probably took it down. But that's my question: how can we deal with this disinformation?
Can we respond to what's been raised, and then, yeah. What? Okay. So a couple things. I mean, building off of what kind of everyone has said in the questions that were asked, a ceasefire is a minimum demand. And we are both preparing for an ongoing struggle that is in a different moment, and we have a tremendous amount of power behind us, which is to not in any ways minimize the power we're up against. But we have never, in my lifetime or in the lifetime of even my mentors, seen these numbers on the streets for Palestine. You're doing that, we're doing that. We're trying to stop a genocide. There is urgency, and we will keep doing that. But as Nadya said, as you talked about, Kali, we are also looking ahead and how we're strengthening ourselves for the bigger struggles, the global struggles, the economic, political, environmental struggles, human rights, civil rights struggles that are ongoing and magnifying, and as we grow in power, they intensify their attack, right? And so how are we developing our own outlets And how do we use, I'm like the worst ones, I'm not a social media person, but how do we use the democratic platforms that are also highly censored anyways, but how do we get messages out? And direct action is a tactic towards that, right? It's one way that we influence messages. It's not the only way. It's all the different ways that we speak truth, get truth out. Cultural work is a big part of that, okay. But also here, attacking, yes, the weapons industry, this is a center of it. Technology, surveillance, how are we being critical about how we use technology? How are we being critical about the ways we're opening ourselves up to repression? We need to strengthen our movement for the long term in the way that we get smart and organized, but we also want to continue long-term campaigns of BDS by weapons manufacturers that are working closely with Israel and that have contracts with Israel to be weapons that are used here and everywhere else. So that is some of the longer-term work. I think tax resistance, like a fantastic thing that we could do and we should call for tonight, is don't pay taxes, do a tax protest, all of us. They can't lock all of us up, they will fuck us. But if we all do a tax protest and don't pay taxes, like if we get hundreds of thousands to millions of people in this country not to pay taxes in the name of not funding genocide, that's a strong move. Let's call for that. Great, I like that. Yes, AIPAC. I mean, locally, it's really important that we challenge organizations that claim to do one thing but are really just a vehicle for AIPAC. That's what JCRC is. AIPAC is the funding vehicle and lobby for Israel, right? That's what they do. And so organizations like the Jewish Community Relations Council are a vehicle. They are very well funded, these organizations. This is something you can find on our website, The Business of Backlash. We looked over 8,000 tax documents to show where the money goes that funds backlash against the Palestinian movement and defense of Israel. And they are the most the Koch brothers, they're the most reactionary funders that are connected to white supremacy and right-wing governments here. And so there's very practical things we can do to expose organizations like JCRC. And yes, of course, we can take on AIPAC, but AIPAC isn't going to change. We have to change our relationships to organizations like AIPAC and really challenge relationships that Jewish organizations have to funders like CUFI, Christians United for Israel. So we have to start dismantling these organizations and getting people to divest from them. But I think tax resistance is a really good, bold move that we could make next month. Okay.
I have a kind of a quick question for you all, relative to one of the points that came out. So how many of you all are either well, let me not, because this is being recorded, let me not ask that question. For those of you, so we're going to change it up. For those of you who were born outside of the United States, or your parents were born outside of the United States, we need a level of pressure that you all can bear on the home countries around them taking a firm position around a ceasefire, but setting conditions on their own in conjunction with primarily the Group of 77. If you're not familiar with it, I want you to write it down and look it up, that are, in some level of congruence, because the issue is the way the ceasefire is being talked, even at a minimum, is primarily being determined by the United States, by Israel, and by Qatar and Egypt. That's fundamentally it, right? The United States has kind of cut NATO out of the process. They've cut other folks out of the process because they wanted to be settled fundamentally on the terms dictated by Netanyahu and the Israeli right. So I think there's a piece in which we have to exert enough pressure for this to truly be monitored in some form or fashion by the United Nations, to apply pressure so it's not a one-sided affair, and that there are more terms that get mediated in accordance with the Palestinians, however complex and contradictory that might be, because they're going to try to only limit the negotiations to the Palestinian Authority, which they've said. So there's a complex game that I think we help the Palestinian resistance by broadening the terms of what this kind of settlement, that's why I use that term, that's their language, not mine, what the settlement might look like. And the more countries that are on board with the side of the Palestinian resistance, the better the terms will be in real politics. And they want us to think that we don't actually have a social movement response that can influence this, which is bullshit. We can, but particularly those who hold foreign passports or have other folks put and apply pressure on your country. Y'all got to vote this way. Y'all got to move in this particular way, right? Because it's going to take that group acting as a whole to any amount of pressure that's going to be able to withstand the United States kind of unilateral control over the process. The terms of the ceasefire, which are important. The terms of the ceasefire are important. So folks don't I'm not saying the ceasefire shouldn't happen. Look, people got to stop being killed tomorrow, today, yesterday. I'm all with that. But we know sometimes in terms of the terms of war, they set the terms in such a way which only enable war to go on even under worse terms. So we need to be clear about that and figure out how do we intervene. And then this is the last thing, and I'm gonna shut up. What they don't want nothing more than say, let's look at the lesson that just happened, like with Thanksgiving. And I'm gonna borrow from Kat. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but a conspiracy fact is the fact that Biden made sure, and his allies, they made sure that the massacre was paused during Thanksgiving because they did not want that dominating the U.S. headlines. And for them to have to be accountable for people sitting at home with their family asking, why 10,000 people got killed yesterday? Or what's going on? What the hell's, how do we justify that? The critical, I mean, they just, we don't count. Some folks ain't human, as far as they're concerned. I'm sorry. So, I mean, I'm gonna end it with this. There's work and there's things that we can do, y'all. Right? Because I've been hearing a lot of concern from a lot of calls and things I've been on of what can we do. There's a shit ton that we can do, and a lot of it can be very impactful. But we need to make sure, and this is the point I was going to end on. Like when they do have a ceasefire, and eventually they will, the mass movement cannot stop because the bombs stop. The mass movement actually needs to go on to create new terms of what freedom could look like. That's what we need to be committed to.
Thanks, y'all. I'll try to be expeditious. I think, so ceasefire is below the floor, which raises a question to me about how much money and efforts our movements have put into advocacy when we can't even get the bare minimum. So needing to really formulate that strategy and ask some really hard questions. I think fundamentally engaging the different layers of colonialism that we have inherited here, everything that the United States is built on, from genocide of indigenous people and the stealing of land, genocide against African people, imprisonment, and capitalism. Every single part of it is something that we have to engage in order to get right. And sometimes that can be really messy on its own. I think what I appreciate about this moment is that I never thought I would see it, but Palestine is, I believe, is the tip of the spear of what can formulate a new anti-war movement that can learn from the past and engage all of our issues because they're one. So it's really on us to get unified. Ma'am, you talked about having what was the word that you used? You said the mentality of defeat. That's how it translated in my mind. Powerlessness, thank you, and self-hate and non-living. So I think that, to me, I'm going to answer the question in terms of education, because I really believe in the youth. I really do. Your question about media, like, I'm 31 years old, okay? The movement that I'm a part of and call my political home, the Palestinian Youth Movement, which, remember I told you all the story about how we almost fell apart? We now have over 16 chapters in the so-called United States, so-called Canada, and we have a chapter in Britain and Italy. Like, we're far from gone. We're stronger than we've ever been. And we're a grassroots organization. Part of our strength is because we have multiple generations when it comes to engagement of technology and experience. We're all the post-Oslo generation, right? I'm not good at making TikTok reels. I'm too old for that. But the younger generation who's coming up under us and who will lead me and who will lead all of us with genuine clarity and discipline, they are engaging those platforms. And the Zionists don't know how to organize. We had 500,000 people come to our rally. I told Al Jazeera 300,000 at 2:30. Okay, I was there, I saw it. That was before all the buses from New York arrived. That's before all the buses from Philadelphia arrived. We had over 500,000 people in DC on November 4th. Okay. And people spent their own money. We didn't have to pay anybody. And part of that, and we put it together in 15 days. Part of that is because we've been organizing and in the streets because we know that the outcome for y'all impacts our outcome. We're all tied together. We're next to each other, right? Zionists haven't had to do that because they just knock on the door of whoever's most in power because they have the hegemony, right? Same thing with the youth and with education. Right? The 5 top organizations, JCRC, right, covering the 5 top organizations who support terrorism, right, in these terroristic protest movements. I'm like, it's very clear that y'all are old and crusty because you can't even use social media as a research tool. So how bad is your information? I have hope in terms of the utilization beyond the corporate media. That doesn't mean that I'm arrogant or ignorant enough to understand how powerful they are, right? And how we have to have a strategy. And I am concerned about the media, political, and diplomatic cover that is being provided for this genocide because it's central. But also, in terms of defeat, powerlessness, it's a mentality. So for us, how do we come to this moment with absolute discipline, trying to create real critiques for each other that's based out of trying to build something that's more solid than what we've inherited, understanding the losses of our movements, understanding that fighting for our political prisoners here is not over, right? Remembering that as we're finding the expansion of Santa Rita Jail here, right? Why do they expand prisons? Because they're gonna put more of us in there. As we fight for that, remembering that prisoners movement is connected to national liberation. It always has been. Why do we have veterans of our movement like Mumia Abu Jamal who's still in prison? Why do we have veterans of our movement like Leonard Peltier who's still in prison? I'm again not ignorant or arrogant enough to know, to not be afraid of what the state is capable of, right? If we don't address Mumia, if we don't address Leonard, if we don't address the other folks who are in prison rotting away who have paid that immediate time, we are not going to be there for ourselves when the state tries to lock us up for being effective in this iteration, because decolonization and this process of fighting the state, it's going to take a toll on our movements, mentally, materially. That's what this whole court apparatus, right, trying to go after you, the JCRC or lawfare, right, engaging in you, it's meant to zap your your virility, your ability to actually think clearly, your material backing, everything, right? To break you down. So I'll end with saying we have to be replaceable. That means that I'm going to be a different type of organizer than Maisha. I'm going to be a different type of organizer than Sara Kali. But for me and my movement, the Palestinian Youth Movement, we need to be replaceable. That means that if I can't do something, I have someone else who can replace it. I have someone else that can replace it. I have someone else that can replace it. Because if they take one of us out, that means literally or figuratively. If they hold us up in court, if they go after us in our character, if they slander us and libel, right? There's someone else who can keep the work moving, because we're not gonna let them hold us up. We have stuff to do. And we are so close to a next stage of victory. We really are. I want to end quickly with bringing in the names of Hisham Awartani, who is lying in a hospital bed with a bullet in his spine. His friends Kanan Abdelhamid and Tahsin Ali Ahmed. They were the 3 youth who were shot for wearing kafiyas walking in Burlington, Vermont. And if y'all have not read Hisham's letter that he wrote when he was paralyzed from the waist down, please, please do, because mashallah, he is a well-raised, revolutionary thinker. And what he says is, don't just think of me and my condition, think of the collective, think of the suffering of our people. So if we take anything, inshallah, I hope we take how important it is to form relationships, political coherency, having these conversations so that we can move forward as a collective of people, because we are absolutely stronger together. And with that, just want to hand it back. Thank you.
Thank you all.